All of a sudden, Jonathan Greenard and the Vikings are headed toward a bitter divorce. What happened? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. Today on the show, some not as fun news for the Vikings because good players appear to want to depart. Jonathan Greenard wants a pay raise. He's underpaid by average annual value, by base salary. He's got a base salary, I think, of $16 million. And other people at his position that are producing like him are even up to like $10 million more than that. Edge rushers are making way more than Jonathan Greenard is making. It's a very team-friendly deal right now. So he wants a raise, but the Vikings, of course, they've got still have to clear like $26 million more before they're cap compliant. So you have an impasse. That has now leaked into the public eye, with Adam Schefter first reporting that the Vikings are willing to trade Jonathan Greenard, and they're doing the thing where it's like, we'll only do it for a really big offer. If you blow us out of our shoes, then we'll do it. But we won't just get rid of him for anything. And then Albert Breer later comes in and reports, well, it was actually that Jonathan Greenard wanted a raise, and it looks like that's not happening. So when you start negotiating through the media like this, when it all kind of floods out like this, it starts to feel a little bit more bitter, a little bit more of a contentious thing. I don't know of any problem with the negotiation there, but if Greenard is asking for a raise and the Vikings are essentially saying we'd rather trade you, I can't imagine that sits very well with Greenard himself. So that's the situation now, that the Vikings might trade Jonathan Greenard. This is a disaster to me. I hate everything about this, and I will go over in this show all of the reasons for that. But really, it comes down to it is so much easier than you think to give Greenard what he thinks he deserves, right? He does deserve like a market rate edge contract. And I don't mean market rate like it's going to reset the market like what some free agent will get. I mean something that is reflective of what an edge rusher should be making in this day and age. That makes sense to me. And I think he's well within his rights to ask for that. And the Vikings are citing via the media, via people like Schefter or Kevin Seifert and those people, they are citing the salary cap. Like, oh, we got this cap crunch. We can't do it. You can do it, but you don't want to. And there's a big difference between those two things. They are not willing to, they are not sufficiently motivated to. And if you're not sufficiently motivated to pay Jonathan Greenard, then who are you sufficiently motivated to pay? Who is going to be worth it to you on the Vikings? And that's where I get really worried. The Vikings mentality this year seems to be shifting away from what it's been for the last 20 years since the Wills have bought them, which is compete at all costs, right? You must be competitive always. There can't be a version of the Vikings that's a laughingstock. Well, the Vikings became a laughingstock this season. And that's not just like the JJ McCarthy memes and stuff. That's not just social media. Around the league, especially at the combine, I think I can say this because multiple media people who are at the combine asking around, getting rumors, were like, yeah, everybody's looking down on the Vikings. They are currently the team that everyone's raising their eyebrow at and going, what the hell are these guys doing? You are that now. And this is what the Wills never wanted to be. And the mentality appears to have changed to accept that, to say, okay, guess we stink. Let's try to hunker down and get rid of everything. And at least we're not spending a lot of money. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like the Wills are unwilling to spend money on this. In terms of the salary cap, I'll get to that in just a second, but that's like where my brain is right away. But the other thing is, there's a bunch of other angles to this. There's a lot of like cope angles about that I feel are kind of cope for a good player is leaving. But you could say, well, he's coming off a shoulder injury. And hey, maybe they just really believe in Dallas Turner. Maybe this is a Dallas Turner thing. Maybe this is letting Jared Allen go so that Everson Griffin can take over. That worked out pretty well about 10 years ago, a little more. And so we'll get into that as well, or replacing him in the draft if you want. But here's what gets me. If you say, God, you got to knock my socks off with an offer, and then Jeremy Fowler comes in and says, yeah, they're hoping for a day 2 pick, that's not knocking anybody's socks off. A day 2 pick is not something that changes the franchise very often. So I will also get into why a day 2 pick is just like not good enough. The day 2 pick and the money that you would spend for trading Jonathan Greenard, which let me go over the actual cap implications of doing that right now. So if the Vikings trade Jonathan Greenard and they don't take on any of the money, which I doubt that they would do, because if the whole thing is about Greenard wanting a new contract, the team that trades for him is going to also have to probably up the money that he is paid. So they're going to have to add money themselves to it, and they'll redo the contract. You wouldn't necessarily need both teams to do it. So assuming it gets traded just as it is, and then you also plug in all of the cuts that we already expect, and then the Ryan Kelly and Harrison Smith retirements, which I am not 100% sure about, but I'm just plugging them in just to see what it would look like. The Vikings are still about $6 million over the cap, so they still need to make a little bit more. $6 million is really easy to make, and then you start doing whatever else you want to do on a rolling basis to sign free agents as aggressively as you want. So that's where we would be here. If you wanted to give Jonathan Greenard some kind of extension or renegotiation, you could also do that and essentially turn the rest of his contract into a signing bonus. So, or the rest of his base salary into a signing bonus, which is also something that players tend to enjoy. Everybody loves a signing bonus. But let's say that the Vikings do that. Let's say that they add $10 million in base salary to the last 2 years of his deal. He's got a couple of void years at the end of his deal. I'm going to actually add another one. I'm doing this in the like contract constructor on Over the Cap right now. So that makes him a $28 million base salary per year. Then I'm going to convert 25 of that to signing bonus. So you would get a $12 million cap number this year, down from the 22 that it was. So you basically taken $10 million off of the cap number for this year. Now he costs $37 million in the next year, and there's a huge void year issue. So I went really, really, really aggressive, and I did not need to do all 25 million into signing bonus, but you could at least do enough so that his cap number doesn't go like significantly up or be a lot more reasonable about it. Instead, in fact, let's do just that. Let's do the same structure where we're adding a void year and we're adding $20 million in new money, but let's be a little bit more reasonable. Let's say we're only going to pull 15 mil off of it. That keeps his cap number still at 20 mil. It's a pretty high cap number, but for an edge rusher, that's still pretty team friendly, gives him what he wants. And the Vikings are still in a decent spot cap wise. They would have 16 million left to do. So it's not quite as good as like trading him away, but it keeps Jonathan Greenard around. And when it comes to those cap savings, you're not going to do better than Jonathan Greenard just with the money and the people that are out there. In terms of replacing Jonathan Greenard, that's the next stuff that we have to discuss. But the point I want to make here is that you can make a pay raise work on the salary cap. You absolutely can do that. You have to restructure some stuff. You have to sacrifice some cap flexibility. But what is cap flexibility? But the ability to cut players later. So you're getting rid of a player now for the luxury of the option to get rid of more players later. And so I start asking questions. I just recorded Locked On NFL, and we talked about the Jets and Breece Hall and the idea that, you know, they shouldn't keep Breece Hall because they aren't good enough to, you know, they don't feel like they're going for a Super Bowl. So why are they doing this franchise tag thing? And it's like, when are they allowed to just have a good player on their team? And I feel a little bit like we're spiraling toward that, where, well, if you don't want to pay this guy, what happens the next time somebody wants a little more money? What are you going to do with Brian O'Neill? You probably have to extend him, and you could do so in a way that costs you more money in the future, but gets his cap hit down now, uses a little bit of that cap space you have in 2027 and in 2028. What about somebody like Eric Wilson? What about whatever you want to do at quarterback, right? Whatever those things are, they're going to cost something. I mean, you could have an idea of the like Kyler Murray vet minimum thing, which would be sort of a convenient out in this situation. But at a certain point, you're going to have to spend money on someone. And what I think bugs me about this whole thing is it really reeks of we don't know the long-term strategy. The Vikings do not have a long-term vision right now. They don't have an idea of what, because they don't know who's going to have the job. If it's Brzezinski, they don't know that yet. And if it's not Brzezinski, they have no idea who it is and what their plan is. They haven't even done the interviews. They don't even know what those guys are thinking. So they're going through this right now, and they're making decisions that there's no two ways about it. They have long-term ramifications without an actual long-term vision. So when you get to 2028, you're going to be dealing with the consequences of whatever you did now, and whoever's in charge of that likely doesn't work here right now. That's a really bad spot to be in, and it means that when you have these pretty normal things that happen every offseason, an underplayed player comes to you and says, hey, this is my market and I think I deserve more. You don't have the mechanisms to handle that because there is nobody whose job it was to envision that scenario. Or if it was Kwesi and he's out the building. So I don't see the vision, and I don't think there is one. And I'm deeply concerned about that. And I'm also deeply concerned about the Wilfs aspect of this. The salary cap is doable. In fact, if you give Jonathan Greenard what he wants, you extend Brian O'Neill, you do the cuts and the retirements that we already talked about. And then I had to do a restructure of TJ Hawkinson for $7 million. So that's half of his base salary. It's not even the max restructure. So a little bit of a TJ Hawkinson restructure, but nothing crazy. You're cap compliant if you do that. You're cap compliant. So don't tell me it's about salary cap. It's about cash, and it's about the owners who just paid $350 million and got punched in the face, are embarrassed, and don't want to pony up again. Call a spade a spade. If you lose Jonathan Greenard, replacing him is the next question. Does Dallas Turner just do that and you don't have to get anything? Or if you do, is it a free agent? Is it a draft pick? We'll talk about all that next on Locked On Vikings. That is a take that I've definitely couched from my wife, who firmly believes that like every person in the whole world should at least try therapy. And if you don't think it's for you, maybe you just had the wrong person, which is why BetterHelp lets you change at any time with no additional cost. There are over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served worldwide. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform. Your emotional well-being matters. Find support and feel lighter in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you want to go ad-free, you can with the Everydayer Club. With free agency right around the corner, you can get 1 month free of the Everydayer Club with code FREEAGENCY. No spaces now through March 15th. You can go ad-free and keep the conversation going on Discord. Join the club at lockedonvikings.supercast.com, and you can also click the link in the show notes that already has the promo code set up in there for you. Moving on. The idea that the Wilfs don't want to pay this contract is, I think, a much more likely scenario than the one where it's, oh, we just can't figure it out on the salary cap. Yes, you can. You always can. You figured out way harder things in the past. And the guy in charge of the whole thing is the guy that did that for you. You've got the best cap guy in the world, so you say, right? He could figure it out, but you're not sufficiently motivated to. So while I hate this, I do want to give it the time of day. What if there is a world where the Vikings could get a draft pick back and then that guy ends up being worth it, right? What if between the draft capital and the money saved, you can get something that has more of an impact on your team than Jonathan Greenard? Okay, let's see if we can find that. My hypothesis? I don't think we can, but that's why you test hypotheses. So the first thing I guess I should mention is the Dallas Turner angle. What if the Vikings are doing this because this is a Jonathan Allen or a Jared Allen, Everson Griffin situation where the young guy is ready to take the next step and do the thing? And I like Dallas Turner well enough. I think I like him more than most Vikings fans like him. I saw the potential even when he was struggling in his rookie year. I saw what that could be. And then, you went, all right, bulk up, do something a little bit more, see if you can't get more pass rush moves in your repertoire. And he did all those things. And sure enough, 8 sacks in his second year, and you're feeling pretty good. In a rotational role, that's very nice. I would say that great, Dallas, the idea of like, oh, great, Dallas Turner is good now. We can just go with Van Ginkel and Turner and then, sell Greenard for parts is short-sighted at best. Because even if Dallas Turner does rise to that level, you now need an edge rusher. That's the thing about getting rid of Jonathan Greenard. Andrew Van Ginkel's 32. And That's not a long-term option. So you have a long-term need at edge rusher. I would say you probably, whether you get a day 2 pick or not back from Jonathan Greenard, you probably have to draft an edge rusher in day 2 now. Like kind of right now, if you want that guy to be ready to go when it's time for him to take over. You probably need one now. So draft capital wise, you're like going neutral and you're getting a rookie that could be, you know, the next big thing, or could be Patrick Jones, or could be, you know, a total nobody that doesn't make the team, depending on who you get, right? That you're now exposing yourself to that range of outcomes, whereas you know that Jonathan Greenard is good. That's why veterans are expensive and rookies aren't. Another concern I would have, if the pair is, you know, Van Ginkel and Turner, just thinking about this year, right? Not thinking about the super long term. Van Ginkel has had injury issues, so I've got a depth concern immediately. And it's not a depth concern that I feel super good about the way that they handled when multiple edge rushers were hurt last year, and how they handled those rotations last year, which is they kicked Jalen Redmond out to edge. Well, he shouldn't be an edge. He should be a guy rushing from the inside. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, I don't think he should be an edge. He should be a guy on the inside. Eric Wilson, he should not be an edge. He should be an off-ball linebacker. Piecing it together with guys playing out of position seems to be Brian Flores' favorite move, and it seems to cause a lot of problems. And I don't think that he is doing that because he would rather do that than like go get a dedicated backup. I think he's doing that because they don't have dedicated backups, and he's piecing together what he can with what he's got. But it would be super cool if we could take this coach that is so well regarded and so exciting around the league and actually give him pieces to work with instead of giving him problems to solve. Love that he's a problem solver, but can we actually like maybe make it so it's not the hardest job in the league to be the Vikings defensive coordinator, because you keep giving him like weird disparate pieces that you have to find ways to fit together and not screw it up. And then you have to like invent a whole new thing that doesn't work. And you get a perfect passer rating from Jalen Hurts every once in a while. Like, it would be very cool if the Vikings could just be normal and give Brian Flores a normal stable of tools. I do think that Flores has a lot of control here. If it is the case that, you know, Greenard is asking for more money and the Vikings don't want to give it, I think that part is kind of out of Flores's control. I don't know if the actual like resource management is, but just the, hey, who are we getting is a lot more in his control. So I'll be very curious to see what kinds of acquisitions that leads to. And if you do trade Greenard away, what those resources go toward. Another issue that I would start to get very worried about here with Hargrave out, who struggled in the run defense anyways. But now you've got two guys that are tweeners in Van Ginkel and Dallas Turner. These are true 3-4 outside linebackers that are going to cover and pass rush and, you know, set the edge and have to be big and have to be fast and have to be these kind of all around players. Jack of all trades, master of none. That leads me to a very big size concern on the Vikings, where they just are a small defense. With Ivan Pace and Blake Cashman right now, I have a feeling you're going to add a linebacker to that room. Maybe that guy's a little bit bigger. You have a lot of D-backs and safeties on the field all the time. Your two edge rushers are on the smaller side. You now got Jonathan Allen and Jalen Redmond. Those guys are on the smaller side for interior players. Allen's a little bit more normal, but Redmond's on the smaller side for an interior player. This is a small defense. This feels like a defense that you just want to run 13 personnel against and just bring out all your tight ends and punch them in the mouth. And that's what happened last year. So you had run defense issues generally last year that didn't have a lot to do with size, except on the inside, but it also had a lot to do with like light boxes and schematic, and there was a bunch of run defense problems and misfits and stuff. So I have a big concern there. I like Dallas Turner as an edge setter. I think he can do it. But when everybody is small, it turns into a global issue that's not like one specific guy taking the L. It suddenly just funnels teams into this really easy game plan against you that if you have the dudes to do it, can be really, really difficult to handle. So for me, the like Dallas Turner is good enough and will fix it angle, it doesn't hold water to me. He was good, but he wasn't as good as Jonathan Greenard at all. Greenard was probably the third best Viking. And I actually remember on the squad show going into last year, we like ranked all the Vikings on the 90. It was this like filler content in July. And I think Jonathan Greenard was unanimously third after Darisaw and Justin Jefferson. And that was it. He's the best defender on the team. You're not just going to replace the best defender on the team with the guy that was behind him for 2 years of his career, very famously. So I don't see that making the Vikings like a better team, right? You have to hope that Dallas Turner plus the money plus the draft picks equals more than Jonathan Greenard. You have to hope that the sum is bigger than the part you gave away to get it. And that's also really difficult for me to imagine. But a big part of that is that Dallas Turner is not a huge pass rush threat every down. He was nice in a rotational role and managed to use his fresh legs and give a different look. But over the course of a game, the thing about a pass rush is that it evolves as the game goes on. The context evolves, because if you're like Dallas Turner, who is a speed to power bull rush only guy, but I'll call it speed to bull. That's 1, 2, 3 steps, cut, and then turn it into a bull rush. It's a great place for young edge rushers to start because it's a really easy move to learn. It's a pretty difficult one to handle for linemen, and it tends, when offensive linemen handle it, they tend to open their hips, open their shoulders, and that sets you up for other moves that you can then learn. It's a really nice kind of stepping stone. And Dallas Turner uses that the vast majority of the time. He did a lot more diversity this last season, and that's really encouraging, but it wasn't enough to be a complete pass rusher. So that's the other part of this. Dallas Turner is not a complete pass rusher. I think he's good enough to earn the opportunity to start. But I was kind of thinking, all right, they're going to go with this same threefer going into next year. They're all under contract. This is great. But now not only do you need to replace Andrew Van Ginkel long-term, but you probably want someone to rotate in and out with Dallas Turner, unless you want guys to start to get to know his pass rush repertoire, right? When you're a speed to power only guy with like 2 subversions on it, he had like a rip a little bit, and I think he had a spin move that wasn't very good. And when you're only on the field for 15 reps, well, that's great. It's pretty hard to guess which one you're going to get because the sample is small. But when you're on the field for 60 reps, guys can just kind of play to your speed to power and then immediately neutralize you 75% of the time. And when it is one of the other ones, okay, now you're in a fight and you just have to win most of that, and you had a pretty good game. So on a larger sample, in a larger game where linemen get to learn your tendencies a little bit better, you need to have more counter punches. And I don't think Turner quite is to that level yet. So if he takes that step and he's to that level, okay, great. Then everybody looks really smart. But if not, it looks like you got worse for resources. And do those resources give you more than what Jonathan Greenard was? So who is in free agency? Who is in the draft that can do this? I have my concerns. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
Moving forward, if the Vikings do indeed get rid of Jonathan Greenard, and it feels like that we're headed to a divorce, the trade compensation that you would get, Jeremy Fowler said the Vikings are looking for a day 3 pick or a day 2 pick, right? Day 2 pick could mean pick 40 and it could mean pick 100. So that's a big range, but that's what they're asking for. And by the way, now that it is known that Greenard wants a new contract, that's going to depress the value further. So it's not even guaranteed that they get that pick. James Rapine covers the Bengals. We talked to him earlier about Burrow. He would love for the Bengals to do this. He said 4th rounder, and Vikings fans were like kind of getting on him about it. And I was thinking like, that's not crazy for trading for a player who's, expensive, going to get more expensive, coming off of shoulder surgery and all that. Like the value is not that high. I think the shoulder surgery is fine, but it's the kind of thing that if you're not the team, you don't know that. And now you're going to depress the value. So I don't know what they get, but it feels like it's going to be something around a 3rd, which is really gross to me. Like that's just so not worth it. So let's put let me put something on the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, I am going to put all of the day 2 edge rushers. You want a day 2 pick for Jonathan Greenard. Here's all the edge rushers you can get on day 2. This is from the last 10 years. And what I want you to do is pause the video. If you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening, you should go look at this because it's pretty funny. Pause the video and tell me which name jumps out here that feels like they would be definitely an upgrade on Jonathan Greenard if you can get a guy that good with your day 2 pick that you got for Greenard. Right? That feels like, ooh, we got rid of the old expensive player and we got the young player. That's the thing that everybody's super, super excited about, right? Get rid of the old expensive player and now we got the young player. But in that list, I feel like Greenard was the best guy on it. He went at pick 90 the year he got drafted to the Texans. There are some names that are interesting, like Alex Highsmith, Emmanuel Ogbah, who went pick 32, is technically a second round because that was a year where somebody lost their first round pick. AJ Epinesa, there are guys that like burned really hot and then kind of fell off, like Sam Hubbard, or like was the back of the first round, but Joe Tryon. And then there's guys like Jabari Zuniga who just like totally never made any splash in the league at all. So you're taking a huge risk. This is the kind of guy you get. I feel like Joseph Osai is the name that comes to my mind, that he was a player. He plays for the Bengals. He's not like a backup. A little better than Patrick Jones, but like he's not an earth mover at all, right? And he's actually somebody that the Bengals are pretty disappointed with and probably are going to replace soon. So he's like a starter, but not a good enough one, and you're losing a perennial Pro Bowler for it. To me, you can't really do this, right? You have to probably spend that day 2 pick on something else and hope that that person has more of an impact, and then hope that the money that you spend can also have that impact. So the problem is you can't add the money in the draft pick together to get a draft pick, to get a player that's worth Jonathan Greenard. That's just keeping Jonathan Greenard. And if they're not going to do that, then we got a problem. So if we want to look at the edge rushers in free agency and assume that the Vikings don't want to pay a bunch of money out to this position because now they're taking a bunch of dead cap and all that, you've got some issues. I mean, yeah, there's a Trey Hendrickson out there who's 4 years older than Jonathan Greenard and not as productive, and probably just as expensive. You've got, you could take a chance on somebody like Jalen Phillips. You could go for like a Boye Mafe or Odafe Owe. Those guys all feel worse to me and are potentially going to cost more than, like, to cut Greenard and sign those guys feels like it would be a more expensive proposition than just giving Greenard what he is going to ask for. So then you got to start looking at, well, what about, going for a free agent Khalil Mack, or going for somebody a little bit longer in the tooth, or going for somebody like who's going to have a second contract, but didn't really, make that many splashes. And you just kind of hope you're getting the like Linval Joseph explosion, like Kwity Paye or the aforementioned Joseph Asai, and you kind of get somebody there and he's a role player, and then you hope you can kind of like make it up in the aggregate and all that. And it's very Moneyball, which is kind of funny for having, fired the analytics GM. The final point, I guess, to make is like this trading away Jonathan Greenard will make the Vikings worse unless you get a miracle. You got a Justin Jefferson, that draft pick, to make up for the Stephon Diggs trade. It's got to be that again. And I think we all acknowledge, as cool as it was, that that's not like a sustainable thing to happen, that requires an amount of luck that you can't bank on. So really, it sounds to me like the Vikings signed a guy to a team-friendly deal, didn't want to pony up when the bill came due there, and are now resolving to let their team get worse so they don't have to spend as much. And I think that it's perfectly reasonable for you to respond to the Vikings in kind. If it's too expensive for you to have a good team, maybe it's too expensive to go to a Vikings game. And I know there are people in the Vikings organization that listen to all the podcasts, at least in the PR staff, because they like to get a beat on like what the media is saying. So I know that there is somebody, whether it's a low-level intern taking notes or somebody higher up the chain, somewhere in that staff who's listening to this show. So I'm talking to you right now. You should go tell your superiors that Vikings fans don't have any interest in watching a team that doesn't have any interest in paying out their loyalty with wins, contention, championships. That is what the expectation of the Vikings has been for 20 years since the Wilfs got in. They have always fallen short, but God dang it, they always tried. They always had an argument. They always went in and said, look, I know that, we can't really expect all that much from Kirk Cousins, but we really think, and here's the numbers, and we really think he can be that guy. If we just get that lightning in a bottle, we can make it happen, right? At least they were trying to argue that with you. This case, I don't think that they're doing that. And I really want to be able to look in a couple months, by the summer, we'll know more or less what the roster is. I really want to be able to look at the Vikings and say, okay, I at least see their argument for what this is. But that argument is way harder to make without Jonathan Greenard on it. Because so much of the argument of the Vikings is, well, hey, that offense is going to have its problems if it's J.J. McCarthy or if it's Kyler Murray or if it's who else. We'll talk about that tomorrow, by the way. And hey, yeah, it's going to have its problems. But at least we got a defense that can carry the offense, right? At least the Brian Flores thing is going to keep us in all the games. Well, not if you start tearing apart the superstars he used to make it happen. Now you got a question mark on both sides of the ball. And it feels to me like the Wilfs, who spent a lot of money last year and got burned, are a little embarrassed. They don't want to put their coach and their GM in front of the combine media. Instead, they'll just lob up some softball interviews on VEN. And they would rather hide away a little bit. And you know what? If you don't want to be seen, then I say, don't be seen. You don't have to go to a Vikings game. You don't have to do that. This, to me, screams sell your season tickets to opposing fans. You want to be embarrassed? Then be embarrassed. I really don't think that a team, and it's not just about the Greenard thing, don't get it twisted, but this whole offseason has felt like a team that is no longer interested in contending for championships, but is interested in saving resources, and everyone is interested in saving their own skin. So if you want a BS email job where you don't do anything and nobody looks at you, then that's fine. But don't forget, people looking at you is how you make your money. So you got to be worth it for the fans. That's all I want to say. We'll see where everything goes. If they do get a contract figured out with Jonathan Greenard and it turns out that this was all just negotiation through the media, I would happily and enthusiastically take all of this back. Absolutely. If they get it done and it's like, oh, okay, you guys were just blustering, cool, happy, move on, never mention it again. But right now it feels like the Vikings are getting a lot worse before they get better, and it feels like a smoking, flaming tailspin. And I don't know how they pull out of it. Talk to you tomorrow probably about all this Kyler Murray stuff. The rumor mill's going pretty hard, but I want to let that develop a little bit too. So I'll talk to you about that tomorrow. As always,